Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner Stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I paid a dark web hacker to recover a deleted 1996 police report. The case was about a serial killer, and my mom was on the suspect list. Alright, before I get into this, I just want to say, I know how this sounds. I know Reddit loves a good deep web horror story, and half of them are pure BS. Some teenager makes up a story about finding a cursed video or ordering some Red Room livestream. But this is real, and I wish it wasn't. I need to be careful about what I say, because I don't know who's watching me now. But if something happens to me, at least there'll be a record of this. So, a little about me. I'm 24, living in Chicago, working from home as a freelance editor. Pretty normal dude. I hit the gym a few times a week, order way too much DoorDash, and occasionally doom scroll TikTok at 2 a.m. like everybody else. But I also have a bad habit of going down rabbit holes, especially when something doesn't make sense to me. And 3 months ago, I fell into the deepest one yet. It all started with my uncle, the file that shouldn't exist. My Uncle Mark is one of those old school, doesn't trust the cloud kind of guys, so he stores everything on external hard drives. He's also a bit of a hoarder, not in a nasty way, but in a weirdly specific way. He has boxes full of old cassette tapes, VHS recordings of the news, even printouts of random emails from the early 2000s. It's like he's archiving his entire life. A few months ago, he called me over to help him set up a new PC. While transferring his files, I noticed something odd, an old folder buried under layers of nonsense, like receipts won 1998 and taxes 2003. It was named Police Reports 1996. Now, I don't know about you, but if I see a random police report on someone's hard drive, I'm gonna read it. Except, I couldn't. The file was corrupted, and that's when the itch started. I wasn't trying to be nosy, but something about it just bugged me. My uncle wasn't a criminal. As far as I knew, he'd never been arrested. So why the hell would he have a police report from almost 30 years ago? And why would it be deleted? I tried to play it cool when I asked him about it. Hey, what's up with that old police report on your hard drive? The way his face dropped, man. I'll never forget it. He froze. The room got dead silent. Then, without saying a word, he reached over and yanked the USB drive from my laptop. You don't need to go digging into that. His voice was different, cold. I let out a nervous laugh. Dude, chill. It's just some old... I mean it. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't anger. It was fear. I dropped it, at least while I was in his house. But the second I got home, I started looking for ways to recover deleted files. And when that didn't work, I turned to the deep web. The deep web and the hacker named Void. Look, I know people exaggerate the deep web. Some folks think it's all hitmen and drug deals, while others think it's just creepy pasta fuel. The truth is, it's just a hidden layer of the internet. Some of it's illegal, some of it isn't. But if you know where to look, you can find anything. I ended up on a forum called Deadlines. It was like a digital black market. People offering all kinds of services, from hacking into old MySpace accounts to full-on identity forgery. I made a post under an anonymous account. Need file recovery for a corrupted police report from 1996. Will pay $500 in Bitcoin. An hour later, I got a response. The user's name was void_777 and their profile was eerie. No bio, no previous posts, just a single line in their signature. Some things should stay buried. Void messaged me directly. The text was short. Send me the file. I'll recover it. No questions asked. That should have been a red flag. Most hackers on those forums ask a lot of questions, especially about police reports. But at that point, I was too deep in to care. I uploaded the corrupted file to a secure drop link and sent it over. 2 hours later, Void replied, "Recovered the document. Be careful with this." There was an attachment, a fully restored 1996 police report, and the second I opened it, my stomach dropped, because this wasn't just any case. It was about a serial killer. The Lake Shore Ripper. The report was from Chicago PD, dated August 4th, 1996. It detailed a series of murders that had taken place along Lake Shore Drive. All the victims were found mutilated, their bodies dumped near the water. The press had called the killer the Lake Shore Ripper, but I had never heard of him before, which was insane, because according to the report, this guy had killed at least 8 people. The weirdest part? There was no public record of the case, no news articles, no Wikipedia page, nothing. It was like the whole thing had been erased from history. I kept scrolling through the report, my hands sweating, and that's when I saw something that made my heart stop. Suspects. There was a short list of names, 4 in total, and right at the bottom, highlighted in red ink, suspect number 4, Lillian Carter. Status, under investigation. Lillian Carter, my mom. My eyes locked onto my mother's name, Lillian Carter. I felt my stomach tighten, like my body instinctively rejected what I was seeing. There was no way, no fucking way. I read it over and over again, my vision blurring. Maybe it was a different Lillian Carter. Maybe it was some kind of clerical error. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The report had my mother's birth date, our old address, her fucking driver's license number. I felt like I was sinking. I scrolled further, my hands shaking. The report described a series of brutal murders that took place between June and August of 1996. 8 victims, all found near Lake Michigan. Their bodies were butchered, limbs missing, skin flayed in long, deliberate strips. Some had their faces peeled clean off, their skulls left exposed to the air like a grotesque anatomy display. Others were found with their tongues missing, as if the killer wanted to silence them even in death. And the worst part, the police believed it was a woman. The crimes of the Lake Shore Ripper. I scrolled further, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. The details were methodical, clinical, but reading between the lines, I could picture it all. The first body, a 24-year-old college student named Daniel Wexler, was found face down in the sand near North Avenue Beach. His body had been drained of blood. That alone was weird. Usually, stab wounds bleed out on sight, but according to the autopsy, his body had been completely exsanguinated elsewhere. His torso was also covered in deep bite marks, as if someone had chewed into his flesh, stripping muscle from the bone. I had to stop reading for a second. My brain refused to accept what I was looking at. The second victim, Marianne Holt, was a preschool teacher, found 3 weeks later, not far from the first body. Her hands were missing, sawed off at the wrist. Her eyelids had been sliced away, leaving her with a permanent, glassy-eyed stare of horror. The crime scene photos, yes, there were photos, showed her hands hanging from a tree branch nearby, fingers curled, as if still grasping for something that wasn't there. I covered my mouth, fighting the urge to gag. Victim 3 was a taxi driver. His tongue was removed, just like the others. But this time, the killer had gone further. His ribcage had been split open, his organs methodically removed and placed beside him in a neat little pile. The fourth victim, Jesus fucking Christ, was a 12-year-old boy. I had to stop reading again. My mother's name was on this report, the link to my mother. I scrolled down, sweat dripping from my forehead. The report didn't say my mom did it. It just said she was a suspect. Why? I kept reading. Apparently, my mother had been seen near 2 of the crime scenes. Witnesses reported a woman matching her description, loitering near Lakeshore Drive at odd hours. One jogger even claimed he saw her watching from the trees on the night Marianne Holt was killed. It also mentioned something about her job at the time. I never really knew what my mom did before I was born, but according to the report, she worked as a nurse at a psychiatric facility. Specifically, she worked with violent offenders. Something about that made my skin crawl. I don't know why, but my mind went to all the little weird things about my childhood that I had never questioned before. Like how my mother always kept the garage locked, how she never let me go inside, or how she knew how to cut things perfectly. Whether it was meat, vegetables, or even fabric, she could slice with surgical precision, or the fact that she had burned almost all of her old photographs. The memories suddenly felt twisted, infected by the things I was reading. I forced myself to keep going. Apparently, there wasn't enough evidence to formally charge her, but police raided her apartment at the time and found something off. Inside a small lockbox under her bed, they found a rusted scalpel, a Polaroid of Lake Michigan, at night, a child's shoe. The report ended with a chilling note. Suspect moved to a new location before we could obtain a formal warrant. Case remains open. That was the last entry. August 7th, 1996. A week later, my mother moved across the country, confronting the past. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen. My entire body felt numb. I checked the time. 3:47 a.m. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and called my mom. I didn't even know what I was going to say. I just needed to hear her voice. She answered after 3 rings. "Sweetheart?" Her voice was groggy, confused. "Are you okay?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was talking to my mother or a monster. "Honey," she repeated. I took a shaky breath. "Mom, where were you in 1996? There was silence. Long. Cold. Then she laughed. Not a normal laugh. Not a nervous laugh. A low, eerie chuckle. "Oh, sweetheart," she finally said, her voice like silk. "You don't want to go digging into that." The exact same words my uncle had said. I felt something deep inside me snap. "Did you do it?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She sighed, a long, tired sigh, like a mother humoring a child's bedtime fears. "Go to bed, sweetheart." And then, click, the call ended. I sat there staring at my phone, my entire body covered in cold sweat. I knew, in that moment, that I had made a terrible mistake, because my mother didn't sound angry. She didn't sound shocked. She sounded amused, like she had been waiting for me to find out. And that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The window across my apartment, the one that faced the street. The blinds were open, and standing in the darkness, just barely visible beneath the glow of the street lamp, was a woman, still, watching. I couldn't see her face, but I didn't need to. I already knew who it was, my mother, and she was smiling. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body had locked up, every muscle tensed in an instinctual, primal terror. She was out there, standing in the street, watching me, my mother, or whatever the fuck she really was. The only thing separating us was a thin sheet of glass, but the way she stood there, perfectly still, almost motionless, it felt like she was already inside, like she had always been here, like she had just been waiting for me to figure it out. The glow from the street lamp barely reached her, but I could still make out the sharp curve of her smile, a smile I no longer recognized. I forced myself to breathe. My mind was screaming at me to move, to run, but I felt like a trapped animal, stuck in my own apartment, nowhere to go. Then she took a step forward. Just one. Slow. Deliberate. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling against the edge of my desk. Then another step. Then another. She wasn't walking. She was pacing, back and forth, like a predator circling wounded prey. My breath hitched. I reached for my phone. 911. My fingers were slick with sweat as I hit the dial button. The ringing felt like it lasted forever. Then, 911, what's your emergency? I swallowed hard, my voice barely working. There's a woman outside my apartment. I hesitated. What the fuck was I supposed to say? She's my mother, but also maybe a serial killer? Oh, and she's been standing outside my apartment, smiling at me, like she knows I found out. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. Sir, are you in immediate danger? I looked back at the window. She was gone. The street was empty. My stomach dropped. Sir? I hung up. My ears were ringing. My thoughts were a mess. Where the fuck did she go? Had she left? Was she inside? I scanned the apartment, heart pounding. Every shadow, every dark corner felt like it was breathing, like she was just out of sight, waiting for me to let my guard down. Then, a soft tap. I flinched. My head snapped toward the noise. It came from the front door. I stared at it, my breath caught in my throat. Then, tap, tap, tap. Knuckles, rapping slowly, deliberately. She wasn't knocking. She was announcing herself. A slow, creeping dread slithered up my spine. I crept toward the door, moving like I was in a dream. I pressed my ear against it, listening. Silence. Then, a whisper. Sweetheart, open the door. I reeled back, my entire body going cold. No. That voice wasn't real. It was wrong. Too soft. Too sweet. Like it was trying to crawl into my head, nestle into my thoughts like a worm. I stepped away from the door, heart hammering. My body screamed at me to do something. Run. Call the police again. Hide. Anything. But I just stood there. And then, the doorknob turned. The hunt begins. I reacted without thinking. I bolted into the bathroom, slamming the door and locking it behind me. My breathing was ragged, too loud. I clamped a hand over my mouth, trying to quiet myself. I could hear her. Footsteps. Inside. Slow. Methodical. You always were a curious boy. Her voice drifted through the silence, syrupy sweet. Always asking questions, digging, prying. I clenched my jaw, pressing my back against the cold tile wall. A slow, deliberate dragging sound echoed outside the bathroom, like something heavy scraping against the floor. I suppose it was bound to happen, wasn't it? The footsteps stopped, right outside the door. I squeezed my eyes shut. My fingers dug into my palms. The handle jiggled. Once. Twice. Then, a long, rasping breath. I held my own, waiting, listening. Then, silence. I stayed there, pressed against the wall, for what felt like hours. Finally, I worked up the courage to move. My limbs felt like they were filled with sand. I reached for my phone. 4:26 a.m. I swallowed hard, bracing myself, and slowly turned the lock. The door creaked open. The apartment was empty. No signs of a struggle. No footprints. Nothing. As if she had never been there at all. But I knew better, because on the floor, right outside the bathroom door, was something she had left behind. Something she wanted me to find. A shoe. A child's shoe. Old. Dirty. The laces frayed. The fabric stiff with something dark. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. And then, as if the horror of it all wasn't enough, I noticed something etched into the soul. A date. A birthday. My birthday. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers. I needed answers. Now there was only one person who could tell me the truth. I called my uncle. He answered almost immediately, his voice groggy. "Kid? What the hell? What the fuck did she do?" I cut him off, my voice raw. "Tell me the truth. Now." There was silence. Then, a slow, shaky sigh. "I told you to drop it." "I can't." Another silence. A longer one. Then, "Meet me tomorrow, noon, at the diner on 54th. A pause. "And kid," his voice was hollow, "don't sleep at home tonight." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in my car, parked outside a 24-hour McDonald's, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My whole body was wired with fear, adrenaline, nausea, a sick cocktail that made me feel like I was teetering on the edge of losing my mind. Every shadow in the parking lot felt too deep. Every passing car made my muscles tense. Every pedestrian looked like they were watching me, and my mother's voice kept playing in my head. "Sweetheart, open the door." I felt like I was going insane. I spent hours scrolling through my phone, trying to find any record of the Lakeshore Ripper. Nothing. No old news articles, no archived police reports, no mentions on conspiracy forums. It was like the entire case had been erased from existence. But it was real. I had seen the photos. I had seen my mother's name on the suspect list, and she had been inside my apartment. I checked the clock. 11:47 a.m. I had 13 minutes before I was supposed to meet my uncle. I pulled out of the parking lot and started driving, the tension coiling in my stomach like razor wire. The diner on 54th, the diner was one of those old, greasy spoon places that smelled like burnt coffee and fried eggs. It wasn't busy. There were only a few scattered customers, an old man reading a newspaper, a woman feeding her toddler, a guy in a business suit scrolling through his phone. But I only cared about one person, my uncle. He was already sitting in a corner booth, hunched over a cup of coffee. He looked tired, older than I remembered. His eyes had deep, sunken circles, and his hands trembled as he lifted the cup to his lips. I slid into the booth across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, "How much do you know?" His voice was flat, lifeless. I exhaled shakily. "I know about the Lakeshore Ripper. I know about the victims, and I know Mom was a suspect." His face twitched, a tiny, almost imperceptible reaction. Then he nodded. "She wasn't just a suspect." My pulse stopped. "What?" He rubbed a hand down his face. "She did it, kid." The words felt like a punch to the gut. I shook my head, a reflexive denial. No. She was never arrested. They didn't have proof." He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "They didn't need proof." I stared at him. My mind felt fractured. He leaned forward, lowered his voice. The cops knew. The feds knew. Fuck, even the mayor knew. But they didn't arrest her because they were afraid of her. A sick chill spread through my veins. I felt like I was losing grip on reality. Afraid? I echoed. He nodded. His fingers tightened around the coffee cup. Your mother isn't normal, kid. She never was. There's something wrong with her. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? He exhaled sharply, looking around the diner like he was checking for listening ears. You ever heard the stories about serial killers? The ones who seem too smart, too careful. The ones who don't fit the pattern. I nodded slowly. Your mother was one of them, but worse. He leaned in closer. She didn't kill out of rage, or impulse, or even pleasure. His eyes locked onto mine, dark and haunted. She killed because she liked it, and because she was good at it. What she did to the bodies, I felt like my skin was peeling away, like reality itself was breaking apart around me. She knew how to clean up, knew how to cover her tracks. That's why they never caught her. His hand shook. He took a deep breath, like he was trying to steady himself. The cops weren't the first ones to suspect her. We were. My blood turned to ice. Your dad and I, we started noticing things. Weird things. I gripped the edge of the table. Like what? He hesitated. Then, in a whisper, the meat. A thick, suffocating silence settled between us. I barely managed to choke out. What? His face twisted like he was trying to stop himself from throwing up. Your mother never bought meat from the grocery store. Never. The words felt wrong. She always had her own supply. My throat closed up. She would store it in the garage freezer. Large cuts, wrapped up. She always said it was venison. I shook my head violently. Number. No. He kept going. One night, when you were a baby, your dad got curious. He went into the garage while she was asleep, opened the freezer. He swallowed hard. It wasn't venison. I gripped the table so tightly, I thought my fingernails would snap. It was human. I couldn't breathe. He saw bones, a severed hand, a fucking spine. I felt like I was going to black out. Your mother caught him. I shook my head wildly. Dad never said anything. He never, because she made sure he wouldn't. The room tilted. She threatened him, said if he ever told anyone, he'd be the next body in that freezer. My vision blurred. He packed his bags that night. Left. That's why he was never around. He wasn't a deadbeat kid. He was running for his fucking life. The walls were closing in. She let him go. But she kept you. The experiment. I stared at him, my lungs barely pulling in air. She didn't just love killing, kid. His eyes darkened. She loved watching. A sickening dread curled in my stomach. She wanted to see if she could raise a child without empathy, without guilt, without love. I froze. My mind screamed against it, refused to process it. You ever wonder why she never let you have pets? My heart stopped. Because they always ended up dead. A fragmented, horrifying memory surfaced in my mind. A dog. A golden retriever puppy. Maximum. I was 6 years old. I loved him. One morning, I woke up and he was gone. Mom told me he ran away. She killed them, kid. I swallowed a broken sob. She wanted to see how long it would take before you stopped crying. The air felt heavy, suffocating. She wanted to know if she could make you just like her. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. Number. No, I'm not like her. He grabbed my wrist, his grip iron tight. His voice was dead serious. Then you need to run. A chill ripped down my spine. She knows you found out. And she's coming for you. I ran. I don't remember leaving the diner. I don't remember getting in my car. I don't remember driving. I just remember the feeling. Pure, raw terror. A suffocating, skin-crawling dread that turned my entire body cold. I could still hear my uncle's words, echoing in my head like a death sentence. She knows you found out, and she's coming for you. I drove for hours, mind racing, hands clenched around the steering wheel, so tightly my fingers ached. Where the fuck was I supposed to go? What was I supposed to do? I checked my phone. 22 missed calls. All from her. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering against my skull. Then, as I watched, a new message popped up. A text. From my mother. Sweetheart, come home. We need to talk. A simple message. No threats, no demands. Just a gentle, motherly tone. Like she was waiting. Like she already knew I had nowhere else to go. The final visit. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I was too scared to keep running. Maybe, deep down, some part of me still needed her to tell me it was all a lie. Whatever the reason, I found myself pulling into my childhood driveway. The house looked exactly the same. Neat, perfect, pristine. Like nothing had changed. Like it was just another day. But I knew better. I knew what was inside. I stepped out of the car, my legs weak beneath me. The air felt thick, heavy, like the entire house was breathing. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. I pushed it open, and there she was, sitting at the dining table, smiling. There you are, sweetheart. Her voice was warm, sweet, soothing, like she hadn't been lurking outside my apartment in the middle of the night, like she hadn't been inside my home, like she hadn't butchered 8 people and gotten away with it. The table was set for 2, a home-cooked meal, roast beef, mashed potatoes, gravy. Steam curled up from the plates, filling the air with the rich, savory scent of meat. Come sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I didn't move. I couldn't. She sighed, shaking her head. I know you spoke to your uncle. My entire body went rigid. And I know what he told you. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. Did it scare you? I didn't answer. She smiled. Software loving. You don't have to be afraid, sweetheart. Her hand reached for the knife beside her plate. A slow, deliberate motion. She picked it up, examining the blade. I only ever did what was necessary. My stomach churned. You think I'm a monster, don't you? She asked, twirling the knife between her fingers. Casual, effortless. I forced my voice to work. You killed people. She nodded. Yes, I did. No hesitation, no guilt. But they weren't people, sweetheart. They were problems, puzzles, challenges. They were practice. My blood turned to ice. Practice for what? She smiled wider. For you. The world tilted. You were always the real project, sweetheart. You were my experiment. I felt like I was going to throw up. I had to know if it could be done. If I could raise someone without conscience, without fear, without empathy. She tapped the knife against the table. And for a while, I thought I'd failed. Her eyes darkened. You cried when your dog died. You loved too much. You felt too much. It was disappointing. My breath hitched. But now, she leaned forward slightly, eyes gleaming. Now, you know the truth. The air thickened. Now, you have a choice. The knife glinted under the dim light. You can run. She tilted her head. Or you can stay. A long silence. Then, softly. You have it in you, sweetheart. I swallowed, my entire body trembling. You always have. The knife slid across the table toward me. An invitation. A test. I stared at it. The blade was clean, polished, waiting, and for one sickening second, I felt it, a flicker, a whisper, a pull, a deep, primal curiosity. What would it feel like to hold the knife, to use it, to understand? My mother watched me, her expression serene. She knew, she had always known, that I would end up right here with her. The ending you want. There are two ways this story ends. One where I take the knife, one where I don't. Which do you think happened? I guess it depends on who you think I am, who I've always been. But I will tell you this. A few days later, my uncle was found dead in his home. The cops called it a robbery gone wrong, but I know better. And so does my mother, because she still calls me. She still leaves me messages, and sometimes I answer. I bought an unreleased NASA documentary from the dark web. It ended with a warning that they are already here. Alright, I know how this is gonna sound. Everyone thinks they're too smart for this kind of thing. Oh, I'd never go on the dark web. Or, only idiots mess around with that shady stuff. Yeah, I used to think the same thing. Then I got bored. Look, I'm not some conspiracy nut or deep web junkie. I'm just a regular dude, 24 years old, living in a tiny apartment in Chicago, scrolling TikTok until 3 a.m. like everyone else. I have a crappy job at a call center, an on-again, off-again situationship with a girl who only texts me when she's bored, and a Reddit addiction that probably isn't healthy. Nothing about me screams potential horror story protagonist, but here we are. So, a few weeks ago, I was chilling in my apartment. Halfway through a McDonald's order, I regretted 5 bites in, watching YouTube deep dives on unsolved mysteries. You know, those 2-hour videos where some dude with a podcast voice explains how a guy went missing under mysterious circumstances, and the last thing he Googled was how to disappear without a trace. At some point, I stumbled onto a thread about NASA cover-ups, moon landing conspiracies, secret space programs, all that nonsense. But then, someone mentioned something different. There's a NASA documentary that never got released. Supposedly, it was finished, but was scrubbed from existence. It detailed something they found in space, something they weren't supposed to. I mean, come on. How do you not get curious after reading that? I kept digging, scrolling through thread after thread, until I found something interesting. A user with the handle deepsky_404 posted a link, some sketchy looking .onion address, with a single sentence. They tried to erase it, but you can still find it if you know where to look. Now, I'm not a total idiot. I wasn't about to click a random deep web link like some horror movie cliche, but I was intrigued. I knew enough about the dark web to know how to access it safely. VPN, Tor browser, no personal info, the usual precautions. So, I decided to check it out. The website was bare bones, just a black background with white text that said, Unreleased NASA Archive, $250. There was a single button that just said, Buy now. That should have been my first red flag. No previews, no description, nothing. Just NASA Archive and a fat price tag. I hesitated. $250 wasn't chump change, especially for something that could be total BS. But then I thought, screw it. Worst case, I get scammed. Best case, I get to see something no one else has. So, I paid. And that was the moment I fucked up. The download was instant. Just a single 2-hour video file named finaltransmission.mp4. The weird part? It was exactly 2 hours long. down to the second. When I opened the file, the first thing I saw was the NASA logo, official, clean, like any other documentary. Then text faded in. Property of NASA, internal use only, classified level 3. The footage began with normal space documentary stuff. Interviews with astronauts, shots of rocket launches, grainy footage of mission control from the 60s. It all seemed legit. Then, about 15 minutes in, things got weird. The narrator, a deep, serious voice, started talking about Apollo 18. Now, if you know your history, you'll remember that Apollo 18 never happened. The official story is that it was cancelled due to budget cuts. But according to this footage, that was a lie. They did launch Apollo 18. They just never told anyone. And the reason? Because the crew found something on the moon. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. At this point, I was completely locked in. The footage cut to black and white film of an astronaut standing near a crater, breathing heavily through his radio. His voice came through, crackling. I see it. Oh my God, I see it. It's... Then static. The video glitched. The screen filled with digital noise for a few seconds before cutting to another shot. This time, inside the lunar module. The camera was shaky, like someone had knocked it over. I could hear 2 astronauts arguing, panicked. We can't go back out there. We have to. We need proof. They already know. It doesn't matter anymore. Then another voice, deeper, not human. It said something. I don't know what, but the sound of it made my skin crawl. It was low, almost a vibration, like a voice dragged through broken speakers. The video cut again, this time to something much clearer. A still image, a grainy photo of the moon's surface, taken from the module's window. At first, it looked normal, just rocks and craters. But then, I saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of the crater. Not an astronaut, not human. It was tall, way too tall, thin and elongated, with limbs that looked wrong, like they were stretched too far. Its head was tilted slightly, like it was watching. Then, the screen went black. Text appeared. Just 2 words. They're here. Then the video ended. I sat there frozen, staring at my laptop screen. My heart was pounding. I actually felt sick, like I was gonna throw up. I mean, obviously, it had to be fake, right? Some elaborate hoax. But then, why did it feel so real? I tried to shake it off, closed my laptop, went to bed, convinced myself I was being paranoid. But that night, I had a dream. I was standing on the moon, looking out at the black sky. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And in the distance, near a crater, something was standing there, watching me. When I woke up, my laptop was on, even though I was sure I had turned it off. And there was a new file on my desktop, a text file. I clicked it. It was empty, except for one sentence. You shouldn't have watched that. I slammed my laptop shut. My hands were shaking. That's when I noticed something outside my window. A man, tall, still, standing under the streetlight, watching me. I couldn't move. I just sat there, gripping the edge of my bed so hard my fingers ached. My apartment was dead silent, except for the faint hum of my laptop's fan. The glow from the screen barely lit my room, casting jagged shadows on the walls. Outside, standing directly under the flickering streetlight, was the man. No, not a man. Something wearing a man. His figure was too stiff, too perfectly still, like a wax figure someone had forgotten on the sidewalk. His arms hung at his sides, fingers unnaturally straight, like every joint in his body had locked up. He was tall, way too tall. Not NBA player tall, but something more unnatural, like someone had stretched him out just a little too far. His head was tilted slightly, like he was studying me. Then he moved, not like a person, not like anything alive. His head twitched first, snapping from one side to the other in a sudden, jerky motion, like a marionette with its strings yanked. Then his arms clicked as they bent, his shoulders rising in an unnatural shrug, bones shifting in ways they shouldn't. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my lungs started burning. The streetlight buzzed, then flicked off, and he was gone. I launched myself out of bed so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. I ran to the window, pressing my face to the glass, scanning the sidewalk below. Empty. Just the cracked pavement, a few parked cars, and the flickering McDonald's sign down the street. I forced myself to breathe. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I had fallen asleep at my desk, had some weird sleep paralysis nightmare. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. Unknown number. The message was just a single image. A photo of me, sitting at my desk, watching the NASA video. The angle wasn't from my laptop camera. It wasn't a reflection. The photo had been taken from inside my apartment. My stomach dropped. I scrambled back, my breath coming in short gasps. My bedroom door was closed, but suddenly it didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like a thin sheet of paper standing between me and whatever was in here with me. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, my fingers slipping over the screen as I tried to call someone, anyone. But before I could dial, another message came through. A video. My hands felt numb as I tapped on it. The screen was dark at first. Then, slowly, a figure appeared. The man from outside, standing in my hallway. Not outside my apartment. Inside. He was facing away from the camera, his posture eerily straight, his arms still hanging stiff at his sides. He was close, almost too close to the lens, as if he knew exactly where the camera was. The only sound was a faint, wet clicking, like someone chewing slowly, their mouth slightly open. Then he moved. His head snapped towards the camera in a way that should have broken his neck. The screen flickered for a split second, distorting like an old VHS tape, before cutting out completely. I dropped my phone. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, I did something stupid. I convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. Sleep deprivation, stress, paranoia. It all made sense. Right? I mean, I was watching creepy NASA conspiracy videos at 3 a.m. on the dark web. That kind of stuff gets in your head. So I went to work like normal, pretended everything was fine. I'll work in a call center, one of those soul-sucking places where you sit in a gray cubicle for 8 hours, answering customer complaints while slowly dying inside. It was a normal day, up until my break. That's when I checked my phone. Another message. No number. No name. Just text. Stop looking. I swear to God, my entire body went ice cold. I stared at my screen, the words blurring slightly because I forgot to blink. I wanted to ignore it. Just block the number, move on with my life, pretend none of this was happening. Then I got an email from a nasa.gov address. The subject line, "This is your final warning." I clicked it. The email contained a single image, another photo of me. This time, it was taken at work. I shut up so fast, my chair toppled over, earning a few weird looks from my coworkers. My heart was hammering. I looked around, scanning every face in the office, trying to spot whoever the FK was doing this to me. But there was no one suspicious, just the same bored, dead-eyed coworkers I saw every day. I left work early, took an Uber home, kept looking over my shoulder the entire time, convinced I was being followed. When I got inside, I locked every single door and window. Then, for the first time since this all started, I turned off my laptop. That was my second mistake, because as soon as the screen went black, I saw it. The reflection. There was someone standing behind me, not moving, just watching. I whipped around so fast I nearly knocked my chair over. Nothing. But when I turned back to the laptop screen, the reflection was still there. Closer. I ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember unlocking the door. All I remember is bolting down the hall, past my neighbor's doors, sprinting down the stairs, hitting the sidewalk without looking back. I ran until my lungs felt like they were splitting open. I didn't stop until I was in the middle of a Starbucks, surrounded by people, gasping for breath. That's when my phone buzzed. One last message. You can run, but you're already marked. I don't know who or what is after me, but they're not human, and they're already here. I don't remember how long I sat there, hunched over the wobbly Starbucks table, staring blankly at my phone. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped it. The words on the screen felt like they had been burned into my vision. You can run, but you're already marked. The cafe was filled with the usual background noise. Baristas calling out orders, the whir of the espresso machine, muffled conversations from college kids studying, and businessmen pretending to work. It was normal. Too normal. Like I wasn't supposed to be here. Like I had slipped through some invisible crack in reality and found myself in a place that was still playing by the rules. For a moment, I thought about staying. Just sitting there for hours, surrounded by people, until the sun came up again. Maybe if I just refused to go home, if I stayed wherever this thing couldn't reach me, I'd be okay. Then the lights flickered. Not all at once, just the one above me. A tiny, almost imperceptible dimming, like something had passed between me and the light bulb without actually being there. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped across the floor, earning me a few confused looks. I didn't care. I shoved my phone into my pocket and walked out, practically sprinting across the parking lot. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. I pulled out my phone to call an Uber, then stopped, because something was wrong. The sky. It was wrong. At first, I thought it was just my paranoia, my eyes playing tricks on me. But no. The longer I stared, the worse it got. The stars were too bright, too sharp, like they had been cut out of black paper and pasted onto a fake sky. And then they moved, not twinkling, not shifting with the Earth's rotation. They rearranged themselves. I saw constellations I knew, but they were shifting, bending, reforming into shapes that shouldn't exist. A jagged spiral, a perfect circle, a shape that looked too much like an eye. I blinked, and suddenly, they were normal again, like nothing had happened. I stood there, gasping for air, my heart hammering so loud I could hear it in my skull. I clenched my fists, trying to ground myself, trying to remind myself that I was still here, still real. Then I saw the reflection in the Starbucks window. It was me, but it wasn't. The reflection was watching me, not mirroring me, not copying my movements, watching. Its head was tilted, just slightly. Its expression was wrong, too neutral, too smooth. And its eyes, God, its eyes, they weren't mine. They were empty. I took a step back. The reflection didn't move. My stomach twisted. Then, slowly, so slowly, it made my skin crawl. The reflection smiled. I turned and ran. I don't remember the next 20 minutes. I don't remember where I went. I just ran. past empty streets, past the two bright streetlights, humming like dying insects, past dark alleys that felt like they were watching me back. By the time I stopped, my lungs were burning, my legs were jelly, and I was somewhere completely unfamiliar. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. Then I noticed the time. It was 3:03 a.m., and it had been 3:03 a.m. for the past hour. I stared at my screen, cold dread washing over me in waves. I refreshed the app, restarted my phone. Nothing changed. Time wasn't moving. The city was silent. No cars, no distant sirens. Just the hollow sound of wind whispering through the buildings, like a voice I couldn't quite hear. Then my phone buzzed. Another message. No name, no number, just text. Look up. I didn't want to. I really, really didn't want to. But I did. And I swear to God, I still wish I hadn't. Because the sky wasn't there anymore. It was watching me. A hole had opened up where the sky used to be. A vast, endless void. And in that void, there were shapes. Moving, shifting, twisting. Things that weren't clouds, weren't stars, weren't anything that should exist. And at the center of it all, something was looking back. Something big. Something I couldn't comprehend. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled. My body locked in place. I felt like an insect staring up at a god. Then the streetlights all went out at once, and the voice returned. That same deep, vibrating, inhuman voice I heard in the NASA video. It didn't speak in words. It spoke in thoughts, in understanding, and it told me something I will never, ever repeat. Because the second I heard it, something inside me broke. The world snapped back like a rubber band. The lights returned. The sky was normal. My phone read 3:04 a.m. Everything was normal again, but I knew it wasn't, because I wasn't alone anymore. I could feel it, watching, waiting. I never should have watched that video, and now it knows I exist. I don't remember getting home. One moment, I was standing in that silent street, staring up at a sky that shouldn't exist. The next, I was inside my apartment, the door locked behind me, my clothes damp with sweat. But I know I didn't walk back. Something put me here. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. Instead, I sat in the corner of my room, every light on, gripping a kitchen knife, like it would do anything against whatever was out there. And something was out there. I could feel it. A presence, pressing against the edges of my reality, like a hand pushing through wet paper. Every now and then, the lights in my apartment would flicker, just slightly. My phone would vibrate with notifications that disappeared the second I tried to open them. At some point, I passed out, and that's when the dream happened. Except, it wasn't a dream. I was standing in the middle of a shopping mall, one of those big, empty ones, the kind that had once been alive, but had long since been abandoned, left to rot under buzzing fluorescent lights. The air was too still. Every store was filled with mannequins, hundreds of them, standing in perfect rows, their smooth plastic faces turned toward me. They weren't dressed in clothes, just bare, featureless, waiting. I took a step forward, and the overhead speakers crackled to life. A voice came through, flat, mechanical, like a recording from somewhere deep underground. "They are watching." A sound came from behind me, a tiny, deliberate click. I turned. One of the mannequins had moved, just slightly. Its head, which had been tilted forward, was now turned toward me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My breath came fast, too fast, echoing in my ears. I needed to wake up, but I didn't. I took another step forward, and the mannequins followed, not moving, not yet, but shifting. Every time I blinked, they were closer. A whispering sound filled the air, soft and distant, like wind through dead leaves. But there was no wind. The air was thick and stale, pressing in on me like it wanted me to stop moving. I reached the center of the mall, a vast, open space with a drained fountain in the middle. And in that fountain, something was standing there. It wasn't a mannequin. It wasn't human. It was wrong. Its body was too thin, its limbs too long, its skin too pale. Its head was tilted at a severe angle, like it had been snapped to one side. It had no mouth, no nose, just eyes, deep sunken pits where eyes should be. But I knew it could see me. It raised one hand and pointed. I turned. The mannequins were moving now. Their bodies shifted in unnatural, glitching motions, as if they were being rewound and fast-forwarded at the same time. Their limbs bent at sharp angles. Their heads snapped from side to side. Their featureless faces stared at me, without eyes. Then the voice came back, louder now, all around me. "You should not have looked." The mannequins charged. I screamed. I turned to run. And then I woke up. Except something was wrong. I wasn't in my bed. I was standing in the middle of my room, and my TV was on, static, blasting at full volume. My laptop screen was on too, displaying a single image, a still frame from my nightmare. The mannequins surrounding me, and in the middle, the thing. Its head was turned toward the camera now, looking at me. I snapped the laptop shut so hard, I thought I cracked the screen. My hands were shaking violently. I could barely breathe. Then, my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. I did not want to look. But I did. A message. No number. No name. Just text. "They are in your building." My stomach dropped. And then I heard it, from the hallway outside my apartment. A slow, deliberate knock. I froze. The knock came again. 3 times. Slow. Rhythmic. I crept toward the door, every muscle in my body screaming at me to run, to hide. But I had to know. I had to see. I looked through the peephole, and my mind shattered, because there was a man standing there. But he wasn't a man. He was too tall, his arms too long. His head was tilted at the same broken angle as the thing in my dream. And his skin, it wasn't skin. It was plastic, like a mannequin. But the worst part, his face wasn't blank. It was mine. A perfect plastic copy of my face, stretched over his skull like a mask. And then he smiled, not with lips, but with his eyes. Then the door handle turned, and it started to open. The door handle turned, slow, deliberate. The lock clicked, and I ran. I didn't wait. I didn't think. I just bolted. Out of my bedroom, through the tiny hallway, into the bathroom. I slammed the door shut, locked it, pressed my back against it so hard it felt like I was trying to merge with the wood. Silence. Then, a single, gentle knock. Just once, like a reminder that it was still there. I covered my mouth, biting down on my knuckles to keep from making a sound. My entire body was trembling, cold sweat dripping down my spine. My breathing was too loud. I tried to quiet it, but I could hear my pulse pounding in my skull. Then, outside the bathroom door, something shifted. Not footsteps, not breathing. Something else. Something wrong. A slow, dragging stretch of skin, or plastic, or whatever it was wearing, like it was adjusting itself. I squeezed my eyes shut. It was real. It was in my apartment. I should have never watched that video. I should have never gone on the dark web. I should have never looked. Then, a voice. My voice. Right outside the door. "Let me in." I stopped breathing. It sounded exactly like me. perfectly. The same tone, the same cadence, the same little break in my voice when I was nervous. "Why are you hiding?" I pressed my hands over my ears. "You can't stay in there forever." The door creaked. I felt it move against my back. I clenched my teeth, forcing my body to stay still. Then, the voice changed. It was still mine, but now it was distorted, like audio being stretched out and slowed down, like my voice was being corrupted. "You don't belong here anymore." The air in the bathroom thickened. It felt like I was drowning. "You're just a shell now." I squeezed my eyes shut. "We already took you." The lock turned. From the inside, I screamed. I didn't even realize I had moved, but suddenly I was scrambling backward, slipping on the tiled floor, clawing at the sink to pull myself up. The door swung open, and I saw it, Mr. standing in the doorway. But it wasn't me. The skin was too smooth, the eyes too hollow, the mouth too stiff, like it was trying to remember how to move. It tilted its head and smiled, not with its mouth, with its entire face. The skin peeled back as it grinned, stretching in ways that should have been impossible. Its lips split open, revealing nothing but blackness underneath. And inside that blackness, something was moving. I ran. I shoved past it, feeling its skin give under my hands like wax, and bolted out of the apartment. The hallway was wrong. Too long. Too dark. I ran anyway. Doors lined the corridor, all identical, all slightly too tall. As I passed them, they opened, and inside, more of them, more copies, all watching me, their heads turned in unison, their bodies jerking like marionettes. I didn't stop. I reached the stairwell, ran down the steps 2 at a time. The building wasn't right anymore. Everything was too quiet, too empty. I burst through the front doors and onto the street, and froze. The world wasn't real anymore. The streetlights stretched into the sky like bones. The buildings twisted in on themselves like melted plastic. The ground was shifting, like I was standing on the surface of a film reel, the image constantly warping. And the people, they weren't people. They were statues, hundreds of them, frozen mid-motion. A woman with her mouth locked in a silent scream. A man mid-stride, his entire body bent backward at an impossible angle. A child, reaching for something that wasn't there. All trapped, all still. And then, one of them moved. The woman closest to me. Her head snapped toward me, so fast I heard the bones crack. Her eyes were hollow. Her mouth stretched into a jagged, too wide grin. Then the others turned too, all at once, all smiling. I ran until my lungs felt like they were ripping open. I don't remember how long, but when I stopped, I was home. Not in the twisted version of the world. Home, my apartment. Normal, like nothing had happened, except something had. And I knew it wasn't over, because when I looked in the mirror, it wasn't me looking back, it was one of them, and it smiled. This is the last thing I'll ever write, because I'm not me anymore. If you see this post, if you're reading this, don't look for me. Don't search for the video. Don't go on the dark web, because once you see them, they see you too. I paid for a dark web video that claimed to show real exorcisms from the 90s. The priest looked straight at the camera and said, "He's watching you too." All right, before I even start this, let me just say, I know how this sounds. I know how these deep web horror stories go. Some idiot decides to poke around in places they shouldn't, stumbles on something creepy, and suddenly their life turns into a found footage horror movie. Believe me, I wish this was just another one of those stories. But this actually happened, and I can prove it. I still have the nightmares. I still wake up in cold sweats, hearing voices in my head that I know aren't mine. And worst of all, I still feel like I'm being watched. And I think you will too, by the time I'm done telling this. This started about 3 months ago. It was a regular Tuesday night, just me and my buddy Jake messing around on Discord. We do this thing where we go down random internet rabbit holes, watching conspiracy videos, clicking on creepy links, looking for weird shit just for the thrill of it. That night, we got hooked on real exorcism footage. We started on YouTube, watching those grainy black and white clips of priests shouting in Latin while people twisted and convulsed on the floor. Most of them looked fake, but some of them felt real. There was this one clip that really got to me. It was old, probably from the 80s or 90s, filmed on one of those bulky VHS camcorders. The quality was bad, but you could make out a girl sitting on the floor in a dark church, rocking back and forth. Her face was pale. Her eyes rolled so far back, they looked like empty sockets. The priest standing over her was chanting, his voice low and steady. Then, right at the end, the video glitched, just for a second. And in that second, something else appeared in the footage. A third figure, standing in the shadows behind the priest. It was tall, too tall for a normal person, its head almost brushing against the wooden beams of the church ceiling. Its face was blurry, like the camera couldn't quite process it. Then, the video cut to black. I felt a chill run down my spine. Jake must have felt it too, because he laughed, but it was that nervous kind of laugh. The kind you do when you don't want to admit you're freaked out. Bro, I bet there's way crazier exorcism stuff on the dark web. I should have shut the computer off right there. I should have just said, yeah, probably, and gone to bed. But instead, I said, yeah, let's find out. And that was the biggest mistake of my life. I'm not some hacker genius or anything, but I know my way around the internet. It didn't take long to find the right forums, the ones hidden just deep enough that normal people wouldn't stumble onto them. Most of what I found was bullshit. Stupid creepypastas, fake shock videos, overpriced ritual guides that were obviously just scams. But after about an hour of searching, I came across something different. A private site. It wasn't a marketplace, not one of those sketchy sites where people sell hitmen or stolen credit cards. It felt more like an archive, run by people obsessed with forbidden religious history. The posts were full of discussions about Vatican conspiracies, lost church recordings, and secret rituals that were never meant to be seen by the public. And then I found the post. Unreleased 90s exorcism tapes. Warning, not for the faint of heart. The description was short. It claimed the footage was filmed in 1993 in a small church somewhere in Italy. The exorcism had been deemed too disturbing to be released, and supposedly the Vatican had destroyed every known copy, except for one. There was a single thumbnail attached, a still image from the video. It showed the inside of a dark church, lit only by candles. Wooden pews stretched into the shadows, leading up to an old stone altar. But something was wrong about it. In the background, barely visible in the dim light, was a figure, tall, thin, standing completely still, watching. I leaned in, trying to make out the details, but the image was too blurry. Then I saw the price, $50 in Bitcoin. Not cheap, but not ridiculous either. I hesitated. This could be a scam, some random horror movie clip with a creepy backstory. But what if it wasn't? My heart was pounding. I had this weird, heavy feeling in my stomach, like my body knew this was a bad idea before my brain did, but I ignored it. I pulled up my crypto wallet and sent the payment. Less than a minute later, a message popped up in my inbox. Download link will expire in 24 hours. Be careful. Be careful. Be careful of what? I stared at the link. My finger hovered over the mouse. For some reason, I felt like clicking. It was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Then, before I could change my mind, I clicked. A 2 gigabyte file started downloading, and that's when everything started going wrong. I should have never watched it. Even now, I wish I could go back to that moment. When the file finished downloading, when my finger hovered over the mouse, debating if I really wanted to do this. I wish I could slap my own hand away, force myself to shut the laptop, and just forget. But I didn't. I double-clicked the file, and my life has never been the same since. The footage. The video started with static, that horrible, grainy VHS static that hisses in your ears like a dying whisper. It flickered, the screen warping and twisting, like the tape had been copied too many times, like something inside it was trying to break free. Then, the image stabilized. A church interior, lit only by flickering candlelight. The walls were stone, damp and crumbling, like the building was ancient. Wooden pews stretched into the darkness, their surfaces warped with age. In the center of the room was a stone altar, carved with symbols I didn't recognize, intricate spirals and jagged lines, like something scratched them there 1,000 years ago. A girl was sitting in front of it. She was maybe 16 or 17, wearing a thin white nightgown that clung to her sweat-drenched skin. Her face was pale, almost gray, and her hair stuck to her forehead in messy, damp strands. She sat with her legs crossed, rocking slowly, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then the camera shifted, and I saw the priest, tall, thin, face partially hidden in the shadows. His cassock was old, torn in places, the fabric hanging loose around his bony frame. His hands were clasped together, a thick iron cross dangling from his fingers. He was muttering under his breath, his voice low and rhythmic, speaking in Latin. I turned up the volume. That was my second mistake. The second I did, the audio glitched. A horrible, piercing screech cut through the speakers, like metal grinding against metal. I yanked my headphones off, my heart pounding. The noise stopped. I hesitated, then put my headphones back on. The priest was still chanting. The girl was still whispering, her lips moving fast, like she was arguing with something I couldn't see. Her eyes were rolled back. So far, I could barely see her pupils. Then, the camera zoomed in. Her lips were cracked, bloody. The skin around her mouth was raw, like she'd been biting herself. Then, her head jerked up, and she stared straight into the camera. Her eyes snapped forward so fast it looked unnatural, like she had been pretending to be in a trance. But now she was aware, and she was looking directly at me. The priest hesitated. The girl smiled. Not a normal smile. Her lips stretched too far, the skin at the corners of her mouth splitting open, fresh blood running down her chin. Then she spoke. Not in Latin, not in English, not in any language I had ever heard. Her voice was wrong, layered, like multiple people were speaking at once. The sound crawled into my brain, twisting in my skull like worms burrowing into my thoughts. The words didn't make sense, but I felt them, like they were being burned into me. Then, the screen glitched. For a split second, something else appeared in the frame. A third figure, standing behind the priest. I barely saw it, but my stomach dropped. It was tall, too tall, its head almost scraping the ceiling. Its face was a blur, not pixelated, but like the camera refused to capture it. Like the thing wasn't meant to be seen. The camera flickered, and it was gone. The girl started laughing, a dry, wheezing laugh that didn't sound human. Her head tilted back, her whole body shaking with laughter. Her mouth stretched wider, way too wide, until her jaw popped with a sickening crack. The priest raised his hand, his voice turning desperate, his Latin prayers faster, louder. Then, the girl stopped laughing. Her head snapped forward again, and she spoke in perfect English. "He's watching you too." I felt my whole body lock up. She wasn't talking to the priest. She was talking to me. I slammed my laptop shut. For a few seconds, I just sat there, my heart hammering in my chest. My breathing was too loud. The room felt too quiet. Then, my monitor turned back on. I hadn't touched it, but the video was still playing. The screen was black now. A full 10 seconds of silence. I was about to reach for the power button when the video flickered back to life. But it wasn't the exorcism anymore. It was a new room, a bedroom, my bedroom. Same bed, same desk, same window, with the streetlight shining through. The only difference? The closet door was open, and I swear to God, there was something standing inside. The blackout. I don't remember what happened next. I know that sounds stupid, but I swear to you, I don't. I must have blacked out, because the next thing I remember, I was on the floor, my laptop on the ground beside me. The screen cracked like I had thrown it. My room was freezing. I mean ice cold, like I had left a window open in the middle of winter. But all my windows were closed, and my closet door was shut. I grabbed my phone. 3:33 a.m. A notification popped up. New message, unknown number. My stomach tightened. I opened it. There was no text, just a picture, a screenshot of my room, taken from inside my closet. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember thinking. I just remember staring at my phone, at that photo, at the impossible picture of my own bedroom, taken from inside my closet. The closet that was shut now, completely still, the door blending into the darkness like it had never even moved. But it had moved. Someone, or something, had been inside, and I had been asleep. I don't know how long I sat there, my body frozen, my mind desperately trying to convince itself this was just a prank. Maybe Jake was fucking with me. Maybe this was some sick joke. But then I saw the timestamp. 3:33 a.m. The exact moment I woke up. The exact moment I saw my laptop screen still playing that cursed video. I felt like something inside me snapped. I jumped to my feet so fast I nearly tripped over my chair. My eyes locked on the closet door. I don't know what I expected. A noise. A whisper. The door slowly creaking open. Something. But there was nothing. Just silence. That was somehow worse. I took a step forward. My breath came out in short, shaky gasps. My body screaming at me to just leave. Just run. But I couldn't. Because some sick part of me needed to know. I grabbed the closet handle. It was cold. I swallowed the lump in my throat. And then, in one sharp motion, I yanked it open. The closet. There was nothing inside. Just my clothes. The same ones that had been hanging there for years. The same pile of old shoes on the floor. But it smelled wrong. Like something had been in there. Something that wasn't human. The air was heavy, thick with this rotting metallic stench. Something between burned hair and old blood. My stomach turned. And then I saw it. The walls. My entire closet wall was covered in scratches. Not random marks. Words. Dozens of them. overlapping, carved deep into the wood like they had been written with claws. I ran my fingers over the scratches, my throat tightening as I started to recognize some of them. He sees you. He's here. And one phrase, repeated over and over and over, scrawled in jagged, uneven letters. Don't look at him. I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell. That's when my phone buzzed again. A new message. I almost didn't want to look, but I did. And this time, there was text. It said, "Why did you open the door?" That's when the light in my room flickered, and I heard a creak behind me. The shadow in the room. I turned around so fast my vision blurred. The closet door was wide open now, swinging slightly, like something had just stepped out. My entire body locked up. There was nothing there, but I felt it. I wasn't alone. The air was wrong, thick, suffocating, like the oxygen had been ripped out of the room. My ears buzzed with this awful, low-frequency hum, like an old TV stuck between channels. Then, in the corner of my eye, a shadow moved, not like a trick of the light, not like my eyes playing games with me. This was real. Something was standing in the corner of my room, something tall, something watching me. And then, my computer turned on by itself. The video started playing again. Only this time, the footage was different. The camera was shaking now, moving down a hallway. A familiar hallway. I felt my stomach drop. It was my apartment hallway. Whoever was holding the camera was inside my building, walking towards my front door. And then, they knocked. I didn't hear it from my speakers. I heard it from the other side of my bedroom door. The visitor. I didn't move. I couldn't. The knock came again. 3 slow, heavy knocks, like someone was testing the weight of the wood. My phone vibrated again. Another message. Don't open it. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. My breathing came in short, ragged gasps, my chest tight. My heart was pounding. The knocks got louder. Boom, boom, boom. Then, silence. The worst kind of silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. The kind that makes you want to scream just to break it. I sat there, staring at the door, every muscle in my body tight with terror. And then, the doorknob started to turn. Slowly, deliberately. I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted blood. Every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything but sit there like a fucking idiot. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. The door didn't open. Instead, something pressed against it. Something huge. I could hear the wood groaning, the weight of whatever was on the other side pushing against it. The door bulged inward, like it was being stretched, like something was trying to push through without actually opening it. And then, a whisper, right next to my ear, even though I was alone in the room. A voice that wasn't mine, that wasn't human, that said, "We found you." The lights went out, and I finally screamed. When the lights went out, I lost everything. My sense of time, my sense of reality, my mind. It was like the entire world had imploded into nothingness, and I was alone in it, trapped inside a black void that felt too big and too small at the same time. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, ragged breaths clawing at my throat. But beneath all of that, beneath the terror that was shaking through my bones, there was something else. A presence. I didn't see it. I felt it. Something in the dark. Something that had been waiting for me. And now, it was here. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching my phone like a lifeline, but the screen was dead, completely black. No buttons worked, no sound, just a useless glass rectangle that reflected the only thing I could still make out in the darkness. my bedroom door, and the shadow standing in front of it. I felt my entire body lock up. It was tall, taller than any human should be. Its head nearly scraped the ceiling, its limbs too long, too thin, stretching unnaturally, as if it had been starved for centuries. The darkness didn't just surround it, it poured from it, thick and oily, like it was made of something that wasn't supposed to exist in this world. I wanted to scream. I couldn't. The thing took a step closer. My stomach dropped, because I didn't hear the step. I felt it, like the whole room had breathed inward for a second, like reality itself had been pushed slightly out of place. I squeezed my eyes shut. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. I don't know how long I sat there, silently chanting those words in my head, but when I opened my eyes, the shadow was closer, right at the foot of my bed, watching me. There was no face, no eyes, just a deep, endless void, stretching across the space where a human face should have been. But that was somehow worse, because it meant I couldn't look away. It meant there was nothing for me to focus on, except the fact that I was staring into something that wasn't supposed to be seen. And that's when I realized something. The closet door was open again, but I never heard it move. The crawl space. The air in my room felt wrong now. Thick, suffocating. It smelled like rotting flowers and wet earth, like something had been buried alive in the walls and was only just now starting to wake up. The shadow didn't move, but I knew what it wanted. I didn't decide to stand up. My body just moved on its own, like I was being pulled by invisible strings, like I wasn't in control anymore. I stepped toward the closet. My legs felt too heavy, like they were filled with lead, but I kept moving. Every step felt like I was sinking deeper into something unseen, something that had been waiting for me this whole time. I stopped in front of the open door. A crawl space gaped in the back wall, where there had never been one before. The wood looked rotted, soft, like it would crumble under my hands if I touched it. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to run, but the shadow behind me wouldn't let me. So I crouched down, and I crawled inside. The footage that shouldn't exist. The space was narrow, forcing me to crawl on my hands and knees, the floorboards creaking under my weight. My heartbeat thudded against my skull, each breath rasping against my lungs. The crawl space was too long. It should have ended by now, but it didn't. It just stretched forward, swallowing me whole, dragging me deeper into somewhere I wasn't supposed to go. Then I saw the screen, a TV, old and dust-covered, flickering in the dark. I don't know why, but the sight of it made me want to cry, because I already knew what would be on it, and I knew that if I watched it, something inside me would break forever. The static shifted, and the video started playing. It was the exorcism video, but this time, I was in it. The footage showed me, sitting exactly how I was sitting now. My exact clothes, my exact movements, crawling through the dark, watching the screen. And behind me, something was crawling after me. Something huge, something with no face. The thing that had been in my room. I wanted to run, but my own reflection in the screen turned to face me first. And in my own voice, I said, "Don't turn around." The man in the dark. Something touched my back. I don't remember what happened next. I don't remember how I got out of the crawl space. I don't remember how I ended up back in my room. But I do remember waking up screaming, sprawled on the floor, my body drenched in cold sweat, my throat raw from something that felt like I had been screaming for hours. The closet was shut again. My computer was off. My phone was dead. And there were new scratches on the walls. Different ones this time. Ones that hadn't been there before. Ones that weren't warnings anymore. They were instructions, because now the words weren't carved inside my closet anymore. They were carved above my bed, and all they said was, "Let him in." I don't know how long I sat there, on the floor, staring at the words carved above my bed. Let him in. They weren't written in ink. They weren't written in pencil or marker or blood or anything that made sense. They were burned into the wall, like the wood itself had been seared from the inside out, like something had reached into the bones of my house and branded its message into the very marrow of the walls. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe, because some part of me knew. It wasn't a warning. It was a command. And the worst part, I could feel it working. I could feel something inside me unraveling, something deep, buried, something that had been waiting for me to break. And I was so close, because the truth was, I wasn't alone anymore. I could feel him, standing right behind me, watching, waiting, and worst of all, I wanted to turn around. I wanted to look at him, because something was whispering in my head now, something so soft, so sweet, like a lullaby being hummed by rotting lips. Look at me. Look at me. I closed my eyes. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point, I must have blacked out again, because the next thing I remember, the scratches on my wall were gone, but my bedroom door was open, and my front door was wide open too, like I had let someone in. The visitors, I should have run. I should have grabbed my keys and gotten the hell out of that apartment, but instead, I just stood there, listening, because the humming hadn't stopped. It was coming from the hallway now. Low, rhythmic, like someone standing just outside my door, waiting for me to step out and see them. I didn't move. And then, the hallway light flickered. For a split second, I saw them. Not one, not two. Dozens of tall, thin figures standing in the hallway, crammed together, pressed against the walls, against the ceiling, their spines bent, their heads cocked at unnatural angles, and they were all facing me. Their bodies were human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, too stretched, too thin, like they had been starved into something else. Their faces were blank, featureless, nothing but smooth, stretched skin where their mouths and eyes should have been. And then, the light flickered again, and they were gone. The hallway was empty, but I could still hear the humming. It was closer now, right outside my bedroom door, and I knew, if I stepped out, if I crossed the threshold, I wouldn't come back. The end of the tape. I don't know what saved me. I don't know how I pulled myself out of it, but somehow I slammed my bedroom door shut, threw my dresser in front of it, and just collapsed to the floor. I don't know how long I lay there, but at some point, I realized my laptop was on again, and the video was still playing. Only this time, it wasn't the exorcism tape anymore. It was me, sitting on the floor, watching my laptop, exactly how I was sitting right now. And then, the camera zoomed in, and in the background, behind me, in the darkest part of the room, something moved, a shadow peeling away from the wall, stepping toward me, its limbs bending unnaturally, its hands reaching, stretching. I turned around, and there was nothing there. But when I turned back, the video had stopped. A black screen, a single line of text appeared. "See you soon." And then my computer exploded into static. Every light in my apartment burned out at once. And the humming was inside the room now, right behind me. The lost message. I don't remember how I got out. I don't remember running. I don't remember grabbing my keys or stumbling into the hallway, sprinting down the stairs barefoot, barely able to breathe through the panic choking my lungs. But somehow, I made it outside. I don't know how long I stood there, but at some point, I checked my phone, and there was one last message from the same unknown number. I almost didn't want to read it, but I did, and it said, "It's too late. You let him in." I dropped my phone, and that's when I saw my apartment window. The lights were off, but the curtains moved, and behind them, pressed against the glass, a tall, thin shadow, watching me, smiling. The aftermath. I never went back. I left that night and never returned. I packed a single bag, drove across the country, deleted every account I had, changed everything about my life. But it didn't matter, because no matter how far I run, I still see him, in mirrors, in windows, in the corner of my eye. Sometimes I wake up in strange places, my feet covered in dirt, my nails cracked and bloody, like I've been digging into something I don't remember. And every time I check my phone, there's always a new message, always the same words, "Let him in." And the worst part, I think I already have. Final note, if you're reading this, if you ever come across a video claiming to show real exorcisms from the 90s, don't watch it, don't download it, don't even think about it, because once you see him, he sees you too. And once you let him in, you can't ever get him out.